Good evening and welcome to the Town of Sandwich Finance Committee meeting for June 24th, 2025. Tonight's meeting is being aired on Sandwich Community Television and will be available for replay. It is just after 6 p.m. and I'm calling our meeting to order. Let's begin by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As a reminder, let's remember to turn on our microphones and speak clearly into it so those at home and those with us in the auditorium can hear us well. We'll continue offering public comment opportunities twice during our meetings. Does anyone with us tonight wish to make a comment? I see no's for that, so thank you, but we will move on. We have minutes from our last three meetings, March 11th, March 18th, and March 25th. Does anyone have any corrections, additions, or edits to any of those? Seeing none, could I have a motion to accept the March 11th minutes?
I motion.
Crystal motions. Nancy seconds. All in favor? Any noes or abstentions? No. Very good. Unanimous on March 11th meeting minutes. March 18th meeting minutes. Could I have a motion for those?
Motion.
Motion from Crystal. Second from Nancy. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or noes? No. All yeas. Unanimous on March 18th. Could I have a motion for the March 25th meeting minutes?
I motion.
Crystal motions. Nancy seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of the March 25th meeting minutes?
Aye.
No abstentions and no no's. So all unanimous on March 25th meeting minutes. Thank you very much. Does anyone have anything for correspondence, statements, or announcements? Seeing none on that, we will move on. For our town manager's report, Bud, could you lead us off with any updates you might have? Really what you've been thinking about relative to wrapping up fiscal 2025 and looking ahead at 2026. And then I also know that the Board of Selectmen are looking for guidance from the Finance Committee on the DPW fire substation shared use site. And that plan is to, the plan really is to receive, the Finance Committee to receive an update and more in-depth review of that at our next Finance Committee meeting on July 15th. So, but you have a preview for us tonight.
Just a couple of quick updates. I'll try to go in order. FY25, the fiscal year we're in now, in general, we're in really good shape. If you look at the reserve fund transfer requests we're going to talk about in a few minutes, they're extremely low when you think of the budgets our size. And you have to remember that until the new charter goes through the special act through the legislature, which it hasn't yet, we're not really able to transfer any money between accounts. If we could do that, we probably wouldn't even need to ask for a transfer. So that will be a plus once that eventually gets approved by the legislature. Just a couple of highlights. Our receipts have come in really well throughout the year. Like, we're always conservative on how we estimate those. Expenditures have been good. Most of the sort of discretionary accounts that are under our office's control, there's 3 or 4 of those that, as you guys know, we've tried to build up just a little bit in case things go wrong. We're returning a lot of money from all of those. So, I mean, we haven't had to spend a lot of that, which is great. So we should be in really good shape closing FY25. FY26 is interesting. As you guys know, the state budget process, first the governor's budget, then the House, the Senate, the conference committee, and then the final budget. So the Senate budget numbers came out literally a day or two after the annual town meeting. Thankfully, if you plug those numbers into what was voted at town meeting, we would end up with much more of a balance. So, it's good in the sense that some of our revenues are better than we had expected from the state, if that's what gets approved. Some of our expenses were up, but the charges, especially for charter assessments, which is sort of strange because our enrollments are down, but that was up significantly. So as it works its way through the rest of the groups, the conference committee, then the final budget, I can update you, but it's literally been silence for over 6 weeks since we got those numbers, nothing new. So we'll probably get those at some point, July, early August. So fingers crossed, things still look good there. I know we're going to talk about it later. Fortunately, we're not dependent on federal monies at all on the town side for any operating expenses. There's a couple of small grants that we have that are out there, and we haven't heard that those are going to be pulled back. Another thing towards, I know Bill and I are talking about trying to plan for FY27. So we have some follow-up calls with from some small cost centers that we know might impact us a little bit. But what we've been stressing with the department heads is we're looking forward for the next 2 years to submitting really simple level service budget requests. If there's some special thing that's, a cost center that's gone up, we'll address it, but things are looking really good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else budgetarily. This is somewhat related to the budget. So many of you know, when the wing school was sold, there was money coming from the CPA to support the affordable housing project, but then there was also monies coming back from the developer. So they're getting pretty far along in their phase 1. Each of the 3 phases has roughly 40 units in each, knowing that the 3rd phase can't really be constructed until sewering goes by the school. So they just held the public auction on phase 1 last week. So I think there were public lottery. I'm sorry, not really an auction. That would be bad. The public lottery, and there were over 200 applications. So they literally have to go through and randomly pull everyone who applied to get them in a certain order. So then there's certain state procedures they have to follow from now. They let us know that they want to proceed with phase 2 as quickly as possible. So there's been a lot of legal paperwork going back and forth. I believe the closing on phase 2 will happen in literally the next week or two. And included with that is a payment to the town of about $450,000. By law, that goes into that sinking fund. So that, helps. I don't know if you'd call it a reserve, but it helps some of those accounts that we have. The annex, I'm giving an update to the board on Thursday night. Heather Harper and Leanne Drake have been working hard on trying to, we didn't get any bids the first time we went out, and so we've reissued those, and we're trying to do a little bit more marketing. We'll see what happens. So I'll update the board on that on Thursday night. And then, as Ed had mentioned, about, the weeks go quick. I think about 3 weeks ago, the project team, which includes Matt and Crystal, and then mostly our consultants from Weston and Sampson, Kessel Booz Architects, and Pomeroy Associates, did a presentation to the select board, just the latest updates on the DPW fire substation project. The plan is to present a very similar presentation to the Finance Committee on July 15th. Based on the questions that the select board had at the meeting, we're going to try to add a slide or two to address some of those questions, which I think mostly focus it on site costs and a couple of alternative sites that Matt especially knows that we looked at quickly through the process. So we'll try to highlight some of that. And we wanted to make sure that the select board was comfortable enough before we made a presentation to the Finance Committee. So I'll be honest, it seemed like there was a lot of concern about what was presented, and yet they still wanted us to go ahead with the full presentation. So we're going to do that, and they want to get some feedback on several different issues. So if you look in the select board packet for Thursday night, I tried to do a list of what some of those issues might be. Hopefully get some better feedback from them so I can get it to you guys in advance of the 15th so we can be thinking about it. It's clear to say, I would say far and away the biggest concern is the cost. It'll be highlighted in the presentation, but the cost per square foot on projects has just gone crazy. So I know that will be a key focus. And there's a lot of other things that we could look at. It's fair to say that we've more or less expended all but like 25,000 of the appropriations that we had to bring the concept as far as we have, and to do a little bit more due diligence that they wanted on some additional borings at the site to make sure they knew the soils underneath. And they also assessed the cost to bring up the 2 existing buildings if we didn't build new and we just replaced in kind, what those costs would be. So we have information on that that's in the presentation. I think that's about it. I don't know. No, I think we're in really good shape for 25. State budget seems okay for 26, and we're already talking about 27 because before we know it, we'll be working on that in less than 6 months. So,
Any questions for Bud? Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, thanks. I just wondered what the fallout is from the WIF not passing.
yeah, so it doesn't change like the basic things that we were doing in terms of like the collection and conveyance system, like the sewer line layout. Like there'd be enough in the current 2% to pay for the design and permitting of that. There's probably enough to pay for the design and permitting of a treatment plant and disposal site. And of all those 3 things, it's the disposal site permitting that probably will take the most effort. It's not the biggest in terms of dollar amount, but that's the hardest thing that's the closest scrutiny we would get from the regulatory agencies at the state and federal level. We're still trying to nail down like what, if any, role the base could play on phase 1. We got we did a really big wastewater update with the select board just after town meeting. So there was an attorney for DEP that gave us an email opinion on what would be eligible for those state revolving fund programs. And that's just low interest loans. Where we really save money is if you get an SRF certification, then you could get the 25% principal help from the Cape and Islands Fund. That's the main, source of savings. So that opinion said, even if the town owned, which it would, all of the collection system in the town of Sandwich, and then it crossed the base to connect to a privately operated system, that even our collection system wouldn't be SRF eligible. So if that's the case, it's fair to say, at least at phase 1, the base is dead. There's been differing thoughts we've gotten from other people at that agency. So literally, like I was on a Zoom with the commissioner of DEP, the deputy commissioner, and the person who oversees and owns the base operation. And we just said, like, you need to give us direction, clarity. Is if this is the answer, we need to do, take care of it on our own. If not, there's still a lot of merit in going out to the base, but anything at the base takes longer. So I keep thinking we're closer to having to do it locally, but I don't think we should toss the base out at all down the road. And if there's a way it could be worked out, there's a lot of positive things about going out there. Like their current disposal system is sized enough so it could literally do our phases 1 and 2. Now, granted, there's some permitting that would have to be received, and there would have to be some cleanup of some PFAS emissions there. But you're talking about an existing site with no neighbors. I mean, anywhere we go in Sandwich, neighbors won't know because it'll be under the ground, but there's still people that could, express concern. So we have a really good summary from our engineer about what the different costs are for those 3 or 4 options. And at some point, I would say once we got better clarity from the state, we should show that to you guys as well. Not quite there yet. I'm sorry. And so where I would see the 3% would be, the third percent would be really helpful to do some of that initial implementation. So I think the design, engineering, and permitting, like that could all be covered by the 2% that we have. It would force us to go back to the voters more often for much larger numbers sooner. I have heard the board talk, and we have talked about, like, should the public be asked one more time to understand, like, it's actually going to cost you more? Like, are you sure, like, you don't want to do that 1%? And one of the things that we're trying to look at is there a way we could help the water district out with some of the public water line expansion? But that's a task. So.
And then, Bud, we're still not really any further on Quaker Meeting House? Like, that's just gonna stay and try to do
Which
the base
part?
first?
Um,
The property that,
Yeah, no, I think we're still trying to look at the base, but if we can't do the base, then that land from that bankruptcy proceeding is perfect for that. It's outside of Zone 2, so that's where we'd have to permit the disposal.
but we're still wanting to go through the base, and then base fails there, we wouldn't be able
We
to.
want to try the base first. We were really explicit with the state, like, we need a final answer. Like, these questions we've been asking haven't been different for, I would say, 3 to 5 years. They've been part of these meetings that are trying to encourage us to work regionally. So some of the, like that email I said, sort of flies in the face of other help that we had been given, for several years.
Okay.
But if that's the answer, then we have no choice, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Bob.
Just a couple of random thoughts. On the, I don't know where I'm pointing, on the building,
Yep.
right, where no one responded to the RFP. If you haven't, I might consider asking 2, 3, 4 local commercial realtors to take a look at that document
Yeah.
and give some feedback on why they see it as problematic. Clearly, no response means
Yeah.
it's unappealing. And I would think a couple of experienced commercial realtors could tell you in an instant
Yeah.
what's wrong. So there's a suggestion you can take away and think on. Then just thinking about Nancy's question and the upcoming discussion we're having on the proposal for the transfer station and the fire station, I think as you're sort of thinking about how to talk to the selectmen and to us and ultimately to the general public, I think the 1% losing wasn't about people not thinking water's important. I think people understand water's important, but I think there's a concern around spending and the total tax burden. And so I would suggest, if you're thinking about coming back and asking for 1% for the water, and you're thinking about asking for some sort of number on public safety, I would ask you, what else? I know there's a what else. And I would ask you to look out with the school department, say 5 to 10 years, and come back to the table with a realistic discussion of what else is out there, because we have had a habit in this community of being asked to spend X, and then when we support X, shortly thereafter there's a Y, and then we spend on Y, and then there's a Z, and I recognize that that's the nature of government, and we have to deliver services, and we have to maintain buildings, but I think it's vitally important as a credibility matter and as a point of information to people to be able to answer the question, what else? And I don't think we've been doing a good enough job on that, all of us collectively. Thanks.
If I could just add on the RFP, we did have Kevin Pepe from Commercial Realty Advisors went through the building before we issued the first RFP. And ironically, the big drawback is not being on a sewer line. The septic restrictions are so great. For a single family home, it would be fine. For a business like a small restaurant, the limited number of seats that the current system could service, I'm not exaggerating, I think it was less than 7 tables or something. It's almost so small, there's not a commercially viable option because the depth to groundwater is so close right there. So that, I think, is probably, in addition, because it's all spelled out in the RFP, there's, asbestos tiles, there's a couple of, things that would have to be mitigated regardless of what the use would be. But I think the big thing is the sewering, so.
Just on the WIF question and comments, my concern about bringing forth the 1% again, I've supported it all along, and still think it's probably the right thing to do, but I believe it's going to get riskier to ask for, given the idea now that we've spent money and lots of time and effort on getting to the base, and it keeps looking like we're not going to get there. So there are monies that have been spent on that effort that aren't necessarily going to be transferable to what's to come.
Yeah.
So I would just be cautious about being prepared if we take the 1% vote again to be able to explain, how our investment to date will pay off versus it being kind of money that's just gone by
I
the
would say,
wayside.
because I know the bills, like far and away, the biggest, if that ends up being the case, we can't go to the base, the biggest loss is the employee and consultant time that's been spent doing it. It's not actual bills to do, detailed engineering or technical things out at the base. Like, we probably haven't even spent, more than $300,000 in 10 years on that in terms of the base stuff. We've looked at a lot of stuff conceptually. We've gotten a lot, almost 500,000 funded by state grants that they gave us grants to study how the base could help the 5 surrounding towns. And, now it seems to be a problem.
Nancy?
Just to jump on Bob's, what if, when I was reviewing the minutes, we had discussion on the buildings, especially the school buildings, and I remember there was an evaluation done, and I say not that long ago, but it probably was. But is that something that can be at least used as a base?
We're working on that. That was 15 years ago, believe it or not. And that's the one where the report came back, said 25 million. We cut it to 5. We asked the voters for 2.5. They said no, and we got 1.5 out of 25 million.
So that's could be potentially, well, probably will be a huge part of what's next, what's coming down the pike.
The huge difference since then is we've improved so many of the town buildings, which is great. I think the other big difference is the schools have, as a whole, have gotten, because they're that much older, need more attention. So we are trying to work to get estimates on that, and have spoken with the school staff about how that can happen. So we're still working on that.
Yeah, I was going to make a comment that perhaps when the school department comes back, we could have an update on where that effort of kind of doing a comprehensive building assessment, including school buildings and town buildings, falls. So if that could be part of the July 15th school department discussion, because I know some of the school committee members have been pushing hard to keep that dialogue alive.
I just made that note.
Thank you, Bill.
That's something they could have on July 15th.
The school is coming in, I'm sorry.
Okay.
The school is coming in on the 15th, just to kind of give an update.
Oh, okay.
I'll speak with both Joe and Michelle and just make sure that that's something, a discussion point.
And that would be also an update on where they stand on all the projects that were ongoing, because that's something we kept saying.
Correct.
We're promised an update, and we only hear it when they come in for budget.
Correct, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else for questions for Bud, Bill, comments before we move on? Okay, seeing none. Bill, can you lead us through the discussion of the reserve fund transfer for fiscal 2025?
Sure. So as Bud mentioned, we're having a good year. We met our revenue goal, our revenue that we had for FY25. We met that in mid-March. So we've had a good year on the revenue side. On the expenditure side, as you can see here, probably what I'm going to ask you for tonight is kind of similar to what we've asked you for in the past is, God forbid something happens this week, bad. Could we have permission to move some money if needed? There's really only 2 departments right now that I guess I'm, quote, concerned about. One is natural resources. They're projected to go over by about $64. We're doing what we can on the salary side this week to make sure that doesn't happen. And fire, which right now, when I did the calculations and projected out overtime, because we do have one more payroll left, right now I think they're going to be ending right about, as you see on your sheet there, about $8,000 in the plus. But again, worst case scenario, God forbid something happened, if there was a huge fire this week and overtime was needed, if there was an injury or something like that, this is kind of, I don't know, rainy day, if you will. And so really what we would be asking for is just permission to transfer up to $100,000 if needed. And I'll just mention again, if the money's didn't get used, they would revert back to free cash. If we did not do the transfer, you did not approve the transfer, and it sat in reserve fund transfer, it's going to revert back to free cash. So the money's going to go back to free cash no matter what, unless we have to use it. I think right now, I think the chances of us using all $100,000 is extremely minimal. I think it would take a pretty big event this week for us to do that. But I'm just erring on the side of caution here. If the committee feels, half of that's fine, that's fine. I think we did this last year, and I think we wound up using like a third of it. Really, that's kind of what we're doing for. That's what we're looking for tonight, is just to do a reserve fund transfer for the potential up to $100,000, and happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions, comments? Jim?
Bill, what happens to the surplus from the fire department budget?
Surplus, it would revert back to free cash. And that's with any department, whether it's fire, police, treasurer's office, any funds that we don't use revert back to free cash, and that actually helps us in next year's budget. So as I said, if we left it right now we have $500,000 in the reserve fund budget. If we don't use any of it, it's going to revert back to free cash. If we transfer it and then don't use it, it's going to revert back to free cash as well.
Anybody else? Everybody comfortable with the 100,000? I see yeses on that. Could someone make a motion to?
Yep, I motion.
Very good. Crystal motions to allow the town to move up to $100,000 of into the fiscal 25 reserve fund transfer. Nancy seconds it. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Looks like it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Our next agenda item is the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, which is a 5-member committee appointed by the town moderator for a 1-year term. The CIPC is comprised of 1 member of the Finance Committee and 4 members at large. Bud, as the town manager, serves as an ex officio staff member without the right to vote. Kevin Klein has been the Finance Committee representative to the CIPC for a few years now. And on behalf of all of us, Kevin, I'd like to thank you for your added service to the Sandwich community and keep us informed of the discussions from the CIPC. So thank you very much. Kevin and I exchanged an email earlier, and Kevin is willing to serve. So I would nominate him to continue his membership on the CIPC. But if there's anyone else that would like to nominate someone else, that can be done as well. But I nominate Kevin to continue on his great service. Any other nominations? Anybody want to second my motion? Nancy will second. Thank you, Nancy.
Everybody seconds.
That went up fast.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. You got it.
It's a really fun committee.
Kevin says he enjoys it, so I think that's the good news of it. That's good. That's what we need. Super. Well, all in favor? Unanimous. Kevin, thank you for continuing on. Appreciate it very much. During our fiscal 2026 budget planning season, the Finance Committee heard and we discussed about potential impacts to services, should grants and other funding from the state, federal, and other government agencies if they were reduced. Dr. Marashik discussed a number of programs that could be impacted. Bud, you informed us that the outlook for the town would likely be okay, and as you did just earlier tonight. However, in recent weeks, I know I've heard and read about reduced database research services at the library that were going to be taken away as a result of funding decreases. So, Bud, I wonder if you and your team could just provide an update on any plans that you may have in place as we look ahead.
Sure.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
So I'll start, and I guess I'll start with the general operating budget of the town. So not the school side, but the town side. We do not use any federal funding to fund day-to-day operations of the town. The town has certainly been recipients of federal grants before, especially in the public safety sector. But to run the town of Sandwich on the town side on a day-to-day basis, we do not use federal funding for that. As I mentioned, ARPA, everybody got ARPA, during the COVID outbreak, and, the town certainly made use of ARPA funds. But on a day-to-day operations, there's no federal funding involved in town operations. We do have grants, and when grants become available, as we've talked about numerous times, we do chase grants, whether they're state grants, federal grants. So whenever we can use those to help boost town services, we certainly go for those grants. We've seen those in natural resources recently, public safety, as I mentioned. On the school side, there is quite a bit of federal funding that the school uses, and I would probably defer to Dr. Maruschek on the 15th. I think he could talk much more intelligently about what the school uses operationally wise from a federal perspective. But from a town perspective, we are okay without using federal funding. Again, it's more of just for grants for us that we chase. And speaking with our librarian, Diane, yes, the library will lose a couple of these databases or whatever. She does feel within her operational budget, if needed, if people are asking for these, databases, we can probably work something within the operational budget as we normally do to acquire these databases as needed. But again, on a day-to-day basis, we don't use federal funding to fund the town operations. Simply don't do it.
Very good. Questions or comments on that topic? Okay, very good. Moving on, old business. Any old business that anybody has? Okay. None there. New business, as we've heard, the school department was invited to tonight's meeting to provide an update on how things wrapped up on the budget to the actual side of things for fiscal 2025 and how they're looking ahead to fiscal 2026. They weren't able to make it tonight due to scheduling conflicts, but they will join us for a finance committee meeting on July 15th. So we'll look ahead for that. And Nancy, I'll pass on your comments so that it's an all-inclusive update of where we've been, where we're going. So, any other new business? Go ahead, Bud.
I'll just mention this really quickly because it sort of ties into the wastewater and a little bit to the ARPA funds. So you'll remember that Barnstable County got ARPA funds that towns were able to apply for. So we received a hair under $850,000 that was going to be put towards school wastewater treatment plants, mostly focused on the high school. I think we updated you that we went out to bid. The bids came in as expected. We awarded contracts to get all that done. A huge chunk of the work is buying new equipment that would go into the building where the wastewater is treated. There's a backlog of about 40 plus weeks on getting some of that proprietary equipment, which obviously we don't control. So we tried to work with the county on how to spend that money as fast as we can, because that's one of our concerns. Like, what if from above they said, like, oh, if you haven't spent some of your ARPA funds, please return them. We've charged probably at least $250,000 of the $850 has been spent to do the engineering, the bidding, the work that's been done so far. Now we have work, because I know we had explained, we received waivers for both Oak Ridge and Forestdale. So our hope is those can be able to be added to the existing contract so we don't have to spend the time to bid. So those, the process they have to go through to physically separate those two schools from the treatment plants and go to a normal Title V system that already exists in the ground, relatively minor work. I think a grand total we're expecting of about $200,000 per school. We're hopeful that we can get that done before the kids come back to school in September. If that's the case, we'll, be 2/3 of the way through the $850, And as Bob had asked, of the 2% that we already have from the WIF, we have more than enough to fully complete all the school projects. So that's really important to get those done as fast as we can. It does look like the high school, which we wanted to do first, will in the long run get finalized last, even though the contract's been awarded and we've ordered that equipment. We're just waiting on it.
Very good.
And after that, the plan would be to work with the schools to hire a third party to manage the high school system.
We are at our next item, which is public comment. Any comments from the public this evening for this portion? Seeing none there, I would like to thank one of our members that's not with us tonight, Andrew Cormier, for his service on the Finance Committee these last few years. He is leaving the committee as of the 1st of July. Andrew provided his voice, often through his votes, for what he and others in our community believe would be best for Sandwich. So a big thanks to Andrew for his time and effort that he provided along the way. With that, anybody else have any closing remarks? Seeing none, we will gather again on July 15th at 6 p.m. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion from Crystal, seconded by Nancy. Thank you all. Have a great evening.